Any given Sunday, week 10 has come and gone. Obviously, a pretty important one in league standings, but also we did kind of have our first somewhat blockbuster-ish trade, which I'll talk about in a weird way because I was involved with it. But anyway, first football stuff, then we get to our league, and I will sprinkle in trade talk as needed. Wrapping up after week 10, we can see not only am I focusing so much on the fantasy season ending, but obviously the NFL season's coming into full form, and we're really getting a good sense of where things are at. The funny thing was, I'm pretty sure someone that looked like me at the start of the season was talking about the AFC and how there should be a lot more offenses and defenses and teams to watch out for and a lot of matches. And we've kind of seen a lot more parity, I think, than we thought. The AFC is just kind of chaos if you think about it, and Vegas isn't always right. Obviously, we know the pros and cons of sports books, but Chiefs Ravens AFC final I think is still the highest odd or the best odds at this point when one of those teams isn't in the playoffs and the other one just kind of started to look okay. But the schedules are kind of ironing out, and the Chiefs still have a pretty rough schedule heading forward. Getting into the playoffs is, like I said, I think last week, not a given. The Ravens, however, you're starting to look, and you can kind of see how the next weeks are going to play out. And if Jax is in, I don't think there's too many people would fight you in saying that they're probably going to just win the North, because I don't think there's that many people that think the Steelers are legit. Could be totally wrong, though. I guess we have to wait and see. But I think we're forgetting about some of the other leagues. I mean, the Colts are obviously surprising, and the South might have two teams come out, but I mean, looking at Jacksonville and Houston, crazy stat. I didn't realize this, that like Lawrence is 1-3 against Mills, and Mills only has 6 career wins at quarterback, half of them against Jacksonville and Lawrence. So I guess we'll see how they bounce back. But realistically, the one that's kind of spiting us, I think most people assume the Bills would walk with the East, and they're kind of being super inconsistent. And the Miami game, I think, was a big surprise. Sometimes you go into Miami and it's kind of a meh game anyway, but I wouldn't go ahead and say everyone saw that one coming last week. But the thing that sucks that no one really wants to talk about, or some people really, really want to talk about, and we're just annoyed with them talking about it. Sorry, Patriots fans. I know there's a few of you in the leagues here, but we had this for about 20 years where we just knew every year you were kind of in the conversation because the guy had taken the snaps. And low key, I think most of us kind of enjoyed the last couple of years where you were scrambling at quarterback. And now all of a sudden, I mean, I think I made the shot earlier. Is Drake maybe good, maybe bad? I think we've got our answer. He definitely is good, and he may be elite. And that sucks, man. We had to deal with the Patriots having a good quarterback for so long. Couldn't the honeymoon period have gone a little bit longer in between another potential franchise quarterback? I know they're saying he's a young Josh Allen, but Josh Allen made way more mistakes in his first couple years so far than Drake is, but I don't know, kind of a bummer, and I certainly don't want to talk more about the AFC because the NFC seems where the show is. Even leading into this week, I think the game of the week and possibly the game of this half of the season, we're up for two teams that have clear flaws but aren't showing them. I mean, the Rams have a quarterback who we all thought at the beginning of the year, or a lot of us thought, can't really move, and so if you get him out of the pocket and get him running, you should have an advantage. September 21st was the last time Stafford threw a pick, knock on something. I'm not trying to jinx him. Since then, he's thrown 20 touchdowns, no interceptions in the last 6 games, and is probably right now the sneaky bet for MVP or someone who might come out of the weeds to do it. Now, their running game has been a little inconsistent and certainly, like I said, the flaw in quarterback, but it does not matter. And they're going up against a team that can barely run the ball and yet have 2 guys who's often on fantasy starting teams and a quarterback that, I mean, Minnesota didn't want. Other teams have had chances to pass on and is just looking electric with a young wide receiver. So their offense isn't supposed to be dynamic. Their defense is supposed to be good. And yet they're putting up like Texas high school football numbers. They're scoring full games worth of points by midway through the second quarter. So those teams going head to head, I am certainly pumped about going into week 11. I don't like talking a lot about the week in advance because I like to keep at least something to myself. So I'll finish with 2 points I noticed from last week. Number one, in that Colts game overseas, I think we forget sometimes that the refs are probably jet lagged too. I mean, they kind of botched a couple calls and then at the end forgot who was supposed to call the coin toss in overtime. So are we supposed to just assume that everybody's off their game there? And the second is, I don't even want to talk too much about Brian Daboll and he got fired, but like, yeah, he should have been fired halfway through the game. I mean, if you watch that, it's one of those like, the first few times you watch shows like The Office and it got super cringy and some people can handle that and some can't, I think we can deal with that in our comedies, but not in our head traumas, please. I mean, Dart has already had more design runs called for him than anyone else in the league. And if you include all kind of quarterbacks that Dayball's had, it is something he just doesn't seem to care so much about. It's not like they're really teaching him how to slide well. He's kind of going full out. I'm not going to blame him for Scadaboo's injury, but you have a lot of guys that are contact first, and young contact first guys do need to be taught how to not be contact first guys. It takes more than a season, but that doesn't mean you have to call the shots. And it certainly doesn't mean you should be going in the blue tent to try and convince them to come back in and quickly and then putting him in the game, getting hurt. I know it was a bad scene, but it does raise the question, had that been a worse injury at the end, could he be charged with that? If you're putting people who can't defend themselves on the field, I mean, it's not that bad. I'm not trying to make a huge issue out of it. We don't have evidence about how bad Dart was before, but he certainly didn't look like he should be on the field, and then he was, and now he's definitely not. So fired one thing, but I don't know. The states like to kind of sue everybody. Can a coach get sued? I actually don't know the answer to that. Let me know if you do. Anywho, I could obviously keep going, but Week 11's around the corner, so let's close the book on Week 10 fantasy-wise first. Then we'll get looking ahead. When the dust kind of settles on the league, I know we're going to look at the last week or so, but it's a week like this that might have a huge impact. Ernie McCracken here did have the top score overall and got the win, jumping up into the top two, making sure that he has control of whether or not he's going to get that bye. Pretty pivotal with all things said and done. And thinking about it, 6 wins versus 4 wins is top versus bottom. We know it's going to come down to the end. But anyway, on to this matchup. I think as per usual with Andrew, Jonathan Taylor's leading the way. He was the running back 1 again. He also had the tight end 2 in Kittle, the defense 1 in Seattle. So obviously the people that he have that went off certainly did. On the flip side of the coin, we have Olave, I believe is a wide receiver 4. And then unfortunately for Jake, the rest was not going as planned. His running backs really let him down. Injuries kind of popped people. A.J. Brown lost it on the sideline, and that's never going to help out. Looking at his bench, he didn't have too many options, although he did have some running backs he could have been craftier with. I just said that because I saw that at the bottom of the screen. Jake's certainly not out of it, but as we're going to see with the standings, it really is going to come down to points scored. So the fact that he scored so low might burn him a little bit more. And like I said, on the other side of the coin, got to be pretty happy with top 2 and top score for the week. This is always a bummer for a number of reasons. Jim came out top 3 score, 2 people he can't play, but he bumped into me, who was one of the 2. Then we went ahead and made a trade anyway, but we'll get to that in the standings part. For Jim's end, I mean, great receiver play, pretty consistent. Egbuka did crack the top 5, and you see that McConkey was just behind him. Warren, who is no longer his player, was the tight end 5, and everyone just kind of did enough to get by, but not a lot of top 5, which maybe just held him back in the end. He had a few points on the bench, but realistically, it was a huge bye week for him. So the fact that he was the 3rd highest scorer probably just shows more about his depth. I left 1 wide receiver on the bench that would have been helpful, and I said goodbye to a slightly underwhelming performance. But let's be honest, JSN he was going off, but then they didn't need him anymore, so I don't think I'd blaming him on that one. I'm going to have a little bit of health issues with Dart was the QB3, and now he's gone. Houston was the defense 5, and then Dravion Henderson, this is why you don't cut people apparently, because I was pretty close to it for most of the season. Then he was the running back 4 this week, so that paid off. Will it be enough to kind of help me out, and did I trade away too much of my now for the potential future? Guess we'll have to wait and see. In our regression to the mean here, apparently everyone's just 500. Could have been a bit different way, so actually a huge win by Kevin, and Paul really could have helped himself out by taking this one down, but unfortunately fell by just about a touchdown here. For his part, he really had some people going off. Trey McBride was the tight end 1, and who would have thought Dylan Gabriel could get more than a couple points, but he sure did, as did Mariota. You think this would be the team of destiny, but unfortunately people like Pittman and Cook massively underperformed, and that really did cost him. Looking on his bench though, this was a commando week, so realistically the fact that he put up this much of a fight, pretty good on his depth, because he's getting all of these guys back next week. This was his down week, and Kevin took advantage. but just barely. If you look here, his tight end underperformed, not great in the flex, but he was great on his running backs. Those were running backs 3 and 5 respectively. More than enough to put it away, even if it wasn't by much. The win was huge. These are 2 people right now that actually, if it ended today, would be playing in the first round of the playoffs. Speaking of 2 teams that right now would be in the playoffs, Michael's holding the last spot. And so when we get to the standings in just a second, you'll see what 500 does. Whereas a couple wins up and V has got the current number 1 seed, but we're going to see how close that is. On Michael's spot, the Goff was the quarterback 4. He had the running back 2. And I mean, most weeks, 41 points is going to be running back 1, but Taylor just be Tayloring. And he did actually just finish outside here. Nico, I think, was the running or wide receiver 6, so just outside of the top 5. Made most of the right choices. Could have made a few subs here, as could have Will. Breece Hall might have helped him out, but not enough to actually take it down. He had his defense 3, but that 3 was on the bench. That was the Chargers. Now, don't blame him for starting Carolina, but just didn't have the horses in this particular one. Bijan going down like that, and that's kind of been your stud. And when Bowers goes off, he goes off. So those guys having off weeks. Just was in the stars. Held on to the number 1 seed, though. However, more weeks like this, you might not. 2 teams that need the win, or maybe they would rather have a little bit control their destiny. If we do need to review, though, just remember the bottom 4 that don't make the playoffs, you get the bye when everyone has the quarterfinals. And remember, there are draft implications for next year for winning that consolation. We can review that if needed, mention it in the chat. Motor City Dude, Stafford was the quarterback 2, but actually the quarterback 1 in terms of who we started. No one started Mills, and he was the quarterback 1. Try not to laugh when you say that. You also had the quarterback 5. So quarterbacks alone pretty much was going to win you this week, and it almost had to. Apparently Minnesota was not your friend, and they massively underperformed. And CMC, who's been a stud all year, I think this is probably his worst performance. Denver also was the defense 4. You were someone else too, dealing with some injuries and whatnot on the bench. However, you also spared him wide receiver 1 on the bench in Jay Will, so that would have made the win a little bit less stressful, let's say. On the flip side, Thielen Breezy, unfortunately for you, I mean, you did kind of ruin another Drake performance. He was the wide receiver 3. You also had the D2 in the Jets. That's against Cleveland, and kind of shocking that the Cleveland quarterback can score as much as they did, but the Jets points and might have something to do with these 2 return touchdowns. I'm not super sure. You made most of the right calls, and you still do have some buy-in injury issues, but 2 teams that are not out of it, but you're going to have to go on a run if this is the year you want to make a run for the playoffs. Looking at our standings, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, the 7-3 isn't that bad, but look how many people. It's only a 2-win gap. It's definitely coming down to plus minus. Even right now, the last playoff spot is definitely coming down to plus minus, which is why I minus, but only by 7 now. Who knew? David Putney, look at you go. We also had a changing of the guards upstairs here because Ernie McCracken, remember, is our top scorer. So right now, if you tied with him, well, you don't want to be tied with him. So speaking of which, Will, right now you win all the way through, and you are through. But a loss could make things a bit tighter. Remember, the big benefit of the top 2 is that you get a bye in that quarterfinal. You go straight to the semis, which is nice. Speaking of something that might have long-term impacts, we were waiting all season for the draft picks to get involved, and they got involved big time. This was something that was brewing for about a week, maybe post actually meeting each other, which stands to reason why we probably should aim before the end of the season to maybe have a night downtown where a few of us can bump into each other. I know some of us have, but it'd be nice for everyone to get in the mix. From my end of it, I do think it's a big price to pay. JSN is someone I was hopeful to be cheering for forever and for always. But for me, I might make the playoffs. I just figured I needed a bit of a retool. 2 people I can keep, 2 good draft picks. Jim gets to make that push. Right now, he gets a top tier wide receiver and certainly someone a top 10, top 15 running back, and could be a number 1 running back if, Philadelphia remembered how to score points and whatnot. This could be a league changer for him and for me. Or just could be a really fun trade between two people that are having a good time right now. Tough to say. Anywho, let's look a little bit more at our matchups before we shut this down. It is going to come down to not just how you play, but who you play. We got our bottom tier here, 2 versus 3. This is a pretty epic one, and I'm really interested to see if the guys I dealt over have a huge impact. I'm guessing they will either way, and we definitely have 2 other playoff teams here going at each other. Us here are tied. Realistically, let's be honest, every matchup is definitely going to matter, and I'm probably going to say that at least 20 more times between now and when this thing's all wrapped up. 4 weeks left, and obviously year 1 is going to come down to the wire, as these things tend to do, but also be interested to see if one trade begets several. I know there's a lot of conversations on the go, or at least I've heard about it, so we'll see if there's any more that pop up in the next, I believe, week, maybe 2. I'll double check that one. Getting into week 11, obviously things are going to be really important. Make sure you double check. The Spanish game does start a little bit early. I think this is the last of the internationals, and it's a super weird one with 2 Hawaiian quarterbacks who actually went to high school at the same high school, I believe, and yet starting it in Espanol means I'm pretty sure Hawaiian people are going to have to stay up all night to watch it. So if you needed more proof that the NFL does not care about its fans, I think we get it on a weekly basis. Anywho, currents of our league. We know matchups matter. We know points do too. So best of luck, everyone, in week 11.